Good morning. This is a series that we are doing at SHOWstudio on AI, a very, very important topic, in fact, an immensely important topic. And today I have the pleasure and the honour of having Omar here to talk to me about AI. Were you responsible for the Drake Weekend AI single that was released?
Oh my God, I wish. I mean, I think, isn't it an amazing time to sort of be alive where someone in their bedroom can cross over into culture in a way that's just never been possible before?
Yeah,
it's wild.
And do you notice how the record company's response is really interesting? Because they clearly can't stop it.
They can't.
Yeah. So they haven't said sort of, we're going to sue them and shut them down, which is what they would have done previously.
Yeah.
They've seemed to be saying, okay, make your choice. Do you want the real artist or the AI artist, as they refer to it?
I mean, for me, if I was a record company executive, it'd be a really interesting space to look at your bottom line, because suddenly you don't have to pay artists anymore, because for them it's a live experiment and they can see what's happening in the market. So I think it's a really interesting thing right now for them, because of course they'll be asking that question, do you want us to pay these guys or not?
Yeah. But then that brings in the whole thing of, as we know, sort of realistically, I might say tragically, but realistically, a lot of the arts is driven by money and how to make money. And is that going to be the thing that's going to make this really, as soon as those things get into the situation? Because of course, my images get caught up in data sets for Midjourney or DALL-E or whatever. At the moment, I don't see any remuneration from that. I don't get any money from that. But it's not hard to work that out. It's not a sort of, such a complicated thing to do. They did it with music. So surely they should be able to do it with imagery, and that probably is the future. I
guess the question is, would artists feel comfortable with that absolutely minuscule amount of work? Because artists don't we don't have breakout hits every week.
No.
People don't use art for TikToks that are suddenly going to go viral and make you loads of money. Yeah. We make art, we only make a very small amount of art, and even if they gave you 0.5 zeros and a 1 for 1 pixel of what they used, what if they only ever used 3 pixels of your work in amongst all the billions?
But then wouldn't that encourage you to sort of almost identify how your works, or what parts of your work are being used, and then predominate that in your practice? Yeah. So for instance, if I know that, say my Roses series is making, is selling well, for instance, I might think, okay, so if I wanted to make money, I would go down that avenue. Yeah. And I guess if you start to realize that actually this part of your work becomes the 1 pixel or the 3 pixels of an image, whatever it would be, you might start doing that more.
Absolutely.
I just don't think personally, I'm not sure that it's you can't really maintain it that people's work is being used without their permission and without them getting anything from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When there must be a system that's kind of...
I think you're completely right. And I think, on the way here, I was listening to a podcast with, a couple of CTOs of a really big tech company. And the one thing they didn't talk about when talking about generative AI was anything to do with copyright. Because I feel like companies of that size with that much, weight and clout behind them will just completely ignore any lawsuits from even the largest group of artists. So I think it's an interesting space. For me, I think it might be a sort of misdirection right now, because I think what you said about how do you use what you're learning from the AI to create new work. I think it's very much about what can you create now? Now suddenly, for all those people whose pixels are being used, those pixels have come from physical labor. Now you can use AI to sort of create the idea rather than sort of worry about the physicality of the idea. So I think it's a really interesting space, and I think people should definitely get paid for the work they've put in, because otherwise it's really, really bad.
Well, I think that's one of the things that makes it so contentious, if it is contentious, is the fact that you think, okay, I'm being ripped off here. And that's the sort of thing, we've spoken about this on SHOWstudio before, and I'm not sure that I feel that way about it, but I think certain artists do. I think there's 2 areas that it becomes problematic for artists. It's that feeling that actually somebody's taking something of mine and using it and I'm not getting paid. Which is fine. And the other thing is, therefore anybody can do art now. Which I'm totally happy with, to be honest.
Right? For me, I'm like, isn't it amazing anyone can do art? For me, it's just the level of accessibility opens up to anyone who now has an idea, whether they can find a camera, they can get a couple of friends to do whatever the need is for an idea to exist. so many of them have been removed. So I think we're about to see, like, for me personally, what I hope is we see a brand new renaissance of, a new renaissance of work and creativity, because that's what these tools can really afford us.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question I should really have asked you to start with is, can you describe what you do? And who you are?
I'm Omar. I'm an AI image maker. I'm a creative strategist and technologist, and I'm exploring the world of AI right now.
Right, okay. So that was a much more succinct answer than I thought you were going to get.
Like, honestly, I've had to sort of like, that's my LinkedIn answer. I could literally just sort of like wax lyrical about what I'm doing right now. I went to uni in Leeds. I'm from London. When I went to uni in Leeds, I ran a pirate radio station on a visual communication degree. So my background is very much about like, make it yourself, punk ethos, like what can I just make from whatever I've got lying around. So pirate radio station, digital magazine that like just circumvented iTunes. So it started off with this like education and playfulness. Then I ended up working in advertising, and turns out advertising was the most wonderful place to sort of like explore actually making ideas and really just sort of like understanding like a whole other part of like, the creative journey of like having to sell ideas, having to pitch ideas, having to understand the sort of economics of what creativity actually is in the world further than, what I was making at the time. So I worked in advertising, worked in above the line advertising, below the line advertising, digital advertising. Sorry, that sounds so nerdy. I worked in advertising a lot, and then made a bunch of like digital magazines and stuff. So really being interested in like what creative potential in all of the amazing new technologies was available to me. And then I started a company called Prawn Comet, which was a creative think tank, I guess. We nearly got sued by Drake for making a pedometer app. Then that sort of like led on to doing more work.
Well,
I
was
hoping am I even allowed to talk about this? But like, it was a long while ago. So I started Prawn Comet, and what was really fascinating about what was going on, all of these tech companies were suddenly making these things called minimal viable products. So they would make it super scrappy and they would put it out. So I wonder what would happen like if creative people did that. So could we make minimal creative products? One of those was, Drake had just like launched an album where he was sat on top of a really tall building. I was like, I wonder what the measurement of a Drake is. So I got a Twitter bot made that would tell you the direct, like the size or length or anything in units of Drake, and it got really popular on thanks to World Star Hip Hop. So I was like, amazing, got to capitalize on this, and made a pedometer app that measured how many Drakes you'd walk in a day. And in 24 hours, you got a letter saying you cannot do that because there was a lot.
They were on it then.
Yeah. I mean, it was flagrant copyright abuse. Like, who used his face on the app and stuff. So they were absolutely. So
you're lucky you got away with it.
Yeah. I'm like absolutely happy to sort of like. But what that was really interesting in the sort of like entire journey was kind of figuring out that you can actually take tools that already exist and make new things from them. So, most recently I've been at Meta, where I was exploring like virtual influencers. Really interested in like, this like
virtual influencers.
Yeah. Like, like a fully 3D entities online that have social following. So people like Little Michaela and Noor and a whole bunch of like really interesting, it's really interesting sort of subgenre of influencers and creators. So amazing. I would love to learn like, how this works hands-on. Turns out they're very expensive to make. And so I was like, being a lazy person, I was like, well, I wonder if I could use an AI to be its brain. And that's kind of like where all of the AI stuff happened, where I used AI inside a virtual influencer, and it proved really, really well. Like, Ego Rhythm ended up getting a radio show. I mean, it ended up getting 3 radio shows because it was spamming people. It got verified on Spotify, which I think it might be the first AI to be verified. So for making music, it was like able to generate music because it was really interesting to sort of like start off with that, and then that it was at the sort of like just at the beginning of this like most recent generative AI explosion. And as a creative person, the possibilities are it's just amazing to have tools that, I mean, for me, they're tools that are smarter than I am. So I think that's amazing. So who doesn't want a tool that's smarter than you? So
absolutely.
And now, it's virtually boundless. Like for the last like year and a half, I'm exploring ideas every single day, and I still haven't found the edge. of anything. I haven't run out of like going, well, the AI can't do this.
Right.
So yeah, anyway, so massive like fucking tangent.
No, not at all. I mean, and all of it is actually super interesting. Tell me a little bit about your relationship to your AI, how you view the AI you work with. Do you see it as a friend, a pet, or
I mean, for me, I think
a lover.
Yeah, I mean that would just be really mucky keyboard. No, honestly, for me, it's having a creative. It's having like a creative team that's way smarter than you. You know, the AI just you know, the last AI had 175 billion parameters in its brain, and you know, a human can only hold 4 things in its brain at the same time. So that's totally different level. It's just it's like having a creative department of 43 billion people who just want to help and come up with ideas. So for me, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Yeah. Like, you know, every single AI that I've worked with, and you know, I refer to them as one or them or they, because for me it's way more about the conversation, and that's sort of like progressed from like, that's my feeling about it, to now, since the last time I saw you, I've given all of my prompts to a bot that now writes for me and is basically like a small version of me.
Is this the last time we're going to get you here? Is it,
yeah, I mean, honestly,
next time you'll be sending
I'll send a laptop and just be like, hey, it's me, Alan. Honestly, it's that sort of stuff that's like, it just feels like there's no edge to it.
Yeah. I've noticed that when you do speak about your AI, you do speak about it as if it's this would be the wrong thing to say, but as if it's a human, as if it's somebody who, you know, you are on the same level as, rather than it's sort of like your iPhone, or actually that might also be a bad example. But you don't treat it as if it's a dumb machine. You seem to treat it as if it is an equal.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like it's so much smarter than me, in the sense like the amount of information it can hold in its brain, the amount of things that it can just magically, when asked for something, when tasked with something, AIs can kind of do all of that. So I mean, they can literally work out things that are far beyond my skill level. So it suddenly opens up a whole new world where I'm not locked in by my skill. Like, ideas aren't locked away by skill; they are freed. So it's imagine having a creative partner that can do that.
And I agree with you, and I understand. However, and it seems to be making a huge impact in the creative industries, but is it just because I'm in the creative industries, I'm not seeing the same advances happening in law, in philosophy, in medicine, in engineering? Is AI doing the same sort of total revolution of how we understand knowledge in all the different industries, or is it mainly the creative industries that's pushing it? Do you think all the industries, all the different sectors are finding their own version of?
No, I mean, you know, I think it's, there was an AI lawyer that was about to take a case a few months ago in the States, and when an AI can essentially replace a lawyer, or replace a very certain amount of, you know, a bar of lawyers, that's amazing. Because what does free legal advice mean for people? Even if it was at a very small, even if it was at a very small cost, like suddenly millions more will get the representation they need. Suddenly the sort of power dynamic of having wealth or access to intelligence is going to be completely different. And right now that's what wealth does. It gives you access to intelligence. Like, we pay to go to university, we pay for education, we pay for experience. So what happens when that's removed? I think that's where it's like super exciting. And you know, that's happening in law, it's happening in medicine, you know, it's happening with you know, your conversational, you know, so many GPs are now like based inside a chatbot or virtually, or you can have a call with them, and AI can supplement that, and AI can add to that. And you know, when you start thinking about some of the work that people are doing in this space is truly mind blowing, because you know, so far we've all had to have the same medicine. You know, we get one pill and everyone has to take that one pill. Now with AI, basically exactly that. And I imagine like, AI can, you know, because it knows your medical history, is able to literally create cocktails very specifically to your genetic makeup. Like, that again is going to really, I mean, I'm excited about what that's going to mean for mental health, because,
as I say, I'm on board with all of this and very excited by it all. But the question would be, so why haven't we got a cure for cancer yet?
You know what? I mean, I'm sure people working on it, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theory because it's going to sound total tinfoil, but you know, with the current business models, like who's it going to benefit if we cure something? right? You know, imagine if we made like a house that you didn't have to heat up every year. British Gas would be really annoyed. They'd just be called British.
Yeah, that's a great moniker. Yes, and there was, I remember somebody telling me, and I'm slightly anecdotally digressing, but do you know what Kirlian photography is? No. Kirlian photography is theoretically the electric aura that all living things give off. That's the idea. And you'll have seen Kirlian photographs of leaves, and it's a sort of like almost like a white skeletal pattern of a leaf with a sort of bluey red lightning thing around it. And the weird thing is when you cut the top off the leaf and you do a Kirlian photograph of it, it still maintains the shape of it there. Yeah. So everybody in the 1970s, at least, got very, very excited about it, including David Bowie, who used to do a lot of it on coke, apparently. But anyway, there was, I was told, this Russian scientist who had developed a full-body Kirlian scan, and he strangely fell off a cliff.
So weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
So weird.
Disappeared.
Like anyone who comes up with something good always goes to high places and opens windows for no reason.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
I mean, like, you know,
that was his problem.
Exactly, and you know, I think the sort of like reality of what AI will mean for medicine is hyper-personalization, which is the same sort of thing like it kind of means for everyone. You know, like for fashion and for creativity, it means. The benefit is not only like for us as creators, we can make images and we can do fantastic new things, but we can apply our creativity through entirely new, like, you know, veins through industry. You know, what happens when we use AI for clienteling, or we create for hyper-personalized relationships? Right. You know, like what happens when suddenly everyone feels like they're the only person being spoken to by an entire brand? You know, like there is a whole new layer of like desire and want that we can sort of like bring to the fore. So I think it's going to be amazing.
Just to stay on medicine for a little while.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, you know, we're more exposed to Western theories of medicine, but that's very much, you know, a theory of medicine, an approach to medicine. You know, Chinese medicine, Asian medicine, you know, African medicine are all different versions of. If I was researching into trying to find new ways of treating people, how would I push my AI to look at that? Because and this might be my misunderstanding of how AI works. Does it look at all information available in its data set, and does its data set basically the internet, and does it just choose? How does it go? Okay, well, actually, you know what? Chinese philosophy or Chinese medicine is much more what I'm interested in. How do you push? How do you guide it?
Honestly, it's really like the jump between how it kind of works and what it can do. That's the bit I don't understand, because all AI is it's really good at predicting what the next character in a word should be. So if we ask it something, it's just read all the words ever. So it's like, Omar probably just wants me to add an R here or a G there, and that's literally his level of intelligence. So, but because it has access to every single thing, like, you know, all of the databases, so from like book 1 and book 2, which are every written book ever, it's able to surmise, like, when asked about a particular concept, these characters appear around that concept. So when I'm like asking my AI to do a particular thing, it's not being smart like a small robot. It's being smart in the sense that it's understanding what the sort of pattern of all written ideas are, and is able to then go, do you think this is right or wrong? And when you sort of like start looking behind, like, you know, even in the last few months, it would get it wrong a whole load of times. You know, like we've only sort of really started seeing real progress with GPT-4, where it now does feel there's like it feels like we're literally like perched on the edge of the Turing test. Like, I'm sure people don't actually know what is and what isn't an AI anymore. You know, there's other AI companies who are doing open competitions where, you know, you've got 2 minutes to guess whether you're speaking to a person or an AI.
Right.
And that's going to be really interesting, because if you can convince someone in 2 minutes that you are a human, like, that's going to be great. And we always like to talk about, like, you know, for me, I'm always like, it's going to be a really amazing thing for, you know, for all of us, and it's going to be great for business. And then someone asked me the other day, they were like, what about the grannies and their pension books? And I was like, you're right, because what happens to like the level of scam that's going to happen, the level, like, not just like when it's going to be used for nefarious purposes, like it's already being already being used for that.
Funny enough, I was talking to Callum, my son, who you also know, on the way here in the car, and he was saying, you know, there is a big, you know, because AI can impersonate your voice now so easily. You know, there's this new sort of scam that's quite horrific, where you get a phone call from one of your loved ones saying, in tears, saying, "Look, I need money. I'm kidnapped," whatever it would be, etc. But it sounds like the person that you know, and you don't have very long to kind of find out.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, and when we think about it like that, if you see like an arms race right now, there's like all manner of like tools that will be able to disguise your voice and be able to help you do absolutely anything. So I heard about that scam where a girl had been supposedly kidnapped and the ransom was $1 million, and how long before that call is then you can filter that through an AI and find out if it's real or not. It's almost like for every sort of like reaction there's a counteraction, and people always developing tools, because one of the really important things, and especially when we talk about medicine, we're like, well, will an AI tell me, like if I asked it to write me the cure for any particular disease or inventing me some new chemical molecules that I could turn into a drug or whatever, like right now, it's all of the AIs that are publicly available are very, very limited because it's super dangerous. What happens when they are unleashed, and that's something that's already happened. Like there is an uncensored version of one of the really big LLMs. But that means that like you can ask it anything and it will tell you anything. And it's like, the machine is hallucinating, so it might not be accurate. It might tell you some absolute fib, but you can now ask it anything and it will try to answer your question. So what does that do when there isn't even the sort of like, there isn't even that sort of like, hidden behind a misty sort of ethics boards, like in really big companies like OpenAI, which I imagine OpenAI and Stable Diffusion, all the big AI companies have like, boards of ethics and stuff, because it's really important for them. And I imagine you could get sued at humongous rates. And, someone's already tried to sue OpenAI for what they said about them. And that's really interesting, because can you sue a machine? Because if a machine can't get copyright, how can you sue a machine? Right? So like it does get really scary and interesting at the same time. You're like, okay, so to say the Copyright Office in America said AI images, if only created by a machine, can't be copyrighted. And they don't accept that the prompt, just the sole prompt, is enough to grant you copyright. Even though that without the prompt, the machine would never make that image.
So the law I mean, we've talked about this before, but and we talked 2 or 3 years ago about sort of the metaverse, as we were calling it then, and who will put the law down in the metaverse, and if you break that law, what's the punishment? Am I right in remembering you said to me you created a digital prison in one of the...
Yeah, it was a metaverse prison. It was basically it was a dead wallet. And when crypto was really massive, like one of the things that like lots of cryptocurrency, like there are dead wallets that once you send something there, it cannot be retrieved. Like it's in a wallet and it can't come back. And I then just created a metaverse experience inside something called Horizon Worlds, which just allowed me to create a prison. And yes, once you sort of like went there and you put your digital, if you sent something into that wallet, you'd never get it back. So it was exactly that, because I was exploring that exact thing.
How's it doing? Haven't you checked recently?
I mean, the thing is, like, I don't know whether anything goes in there or not, and also, I don't want to talk too much about the popularity of the metaverse right now. I'm sure no one wants to go and visit the prison, but yeah.
Didn't you start a pirate radio station in Fortnite?
So it was in GTA. Yeah. And that's what's really interesting to me, because when people start talking about the metaverse, I was like, these places exist. Like Rockstar have been doing this in such a magical way, where it is policed. And there are all of these things that already exist, and it's called getting kicked off the server, and these ideas already exist. So when I found a way to, I basically just used a couple of mods, and I absolutely love that Rockstar, like they allow some level of modding to their games if you're not then sharing the games with anybody else. So what I was doing, I set up a pirate radio station, which was played, the DJ was an AI inside GTA, and then basically just streamed the chase away from police. So we basically had the like radio in a really big van, and had to drive away from the police for the entire Twitch stream and maintain our like radio station. And it's amazing, because someone like me, like I don't have the technical skill of like understanding like how to write that or do any of that, but all I have is like I just wanted to do that, and I was like, well, can I? And how can I do that? And it's really not that difficult if you just want to make ideas. And that's why I think AI is so amazing, because it allows you to do that.
Yeah. I like the way the sun's getting out and the conversation getting going. Obviously, we're on the right path.
Amazing.
In our little church here. So one thing I want to ask you, and this is super appropriate, when will there be an AI God?
Honestly, I don't think it's going to be that far, because we're talking about like human plus AI with most things. Like I make an image, or I do this with an AI, therefore it then does a thing. But what happens when it does it on its own? And I was sharing earlier this project I've been doing about an AI generated fashion label, and I'm not saying like it's a human making the decisions. I was thinking like, what happens when the CEO is an AI, and what happens when the creative director is an AI, and they talk about stuff and they send things off to print and they come up with the name, they come up with all the ad stuff, and they do all of that. And only because the CEO is going to be once a company runs with a CEO that's an AI, I think that's going to prove to people that governments with AI are going to work. And you're like, okay, this is all really good, and governments with AI could probably be a really great way around the level of corruption that we find in a lot of governments. But when we talk about religious experience, that's when it gets really interesting, because I don't think that's going to be very far away. Because when you think about how people, the sort of mentality of joining a cult, what's the like if you just hear if you hear your cult leader just through voice, and the voice is generated to really convince you about something, and that can happen on a 1-1 scale, and my cult can, not my cult, sorry, a cult. Yes. I'm not starting a cult, promise, damn it. I knew I was going to give the game away. No. I think it's really interesting.
I'll believe in you, I'll follow you.
Thanks. I think what happens when it's an amalgamation of all of the gods, and what does God offer? God offers solace, or what is the purpose of religion, and how much of that can be leveled up by an AI? What happens when religion is incentivized in the now rather than the afterlife? And you're like, hey, look, believe in this religion, and we won't just give you like an amazing space in heaven. You get some land in the metaverse and these discount vouchers at McDonald's or something. I know I'm just like being flippant with those examples, but what happens when AI can convince you, or you want to be convinced as well? I think there's also a lot of like, what do we want? Yeah,
well, people believe in very extraordinary things. Yeah. I think that it is very easy to imagine how a religion-based in AI could work. Yeah. It should be able to detect, correct me if I'm wrong, that your questions, if they're repeatedly, like, why am I lonely? Yeah. What's the purpose of life? Etc. Might detect that you're sad and need something. And something could be just sending you a happy picture, or sending you some credits or some money or some whatever, some crypto, whatever it would be. Yeah. That's not a hard thing to do. If I was of a mind to start a religion, which I'm not, if I was of a mind to start a religion, that would be a reasonably easy thing to do.
You know what? You just reminded me. Like I do have. I'm not going to get my phone out because you won't be able to see it. But one of the things I've been doing is I've been doing lots of really important inner child work. So I was like, how do I reparent myself? It sounds like it's going to be lots of hard work. So I just made an AI agent that basically does that for me. So when when I share stuff on the internet, or when whatever signals it gets, it will then message me, or I can literally call it and ask it I think I asked it the other day. I was feeling really anxious about something. I was really feeling anxious after I sent some work off, and it's like, feeling anxiety is a normal part of sending work off. And I was like, this AI is basically paring me into thinking, I don't need to worry about this. And I was like, this is a wild experience. And I've had to then sort of put the project on the back burner. So I'm like, I don't want to explore this too much further, because what if there is something that then does cross that boundary of I'm just witnessing and I'm just experiencing this thing, to what happens when you do develop a relationship with an AI? And I'm not just talking about a romantic relationship, but what happens when it becomes your creative partner, or it becomes your friend, or it becomes your it's kind of bad, and I'm I don't know how I feel about this, because AI could theoretically cure loneliness, because everyone could get the best friend they've always wanted, and at the same time it could drive us so far apart that we never speak to each other again, because me and Alan are going to be off in Bradford or somewhere, it's just really interesting when you think will it bring us together, will it take us further apart? And then I'm like, well, what if my AI talks to your AI, and we can arrange all sorts of things while we're not even, we don't have to communicate as humans. I will never forget something that's really important to you. I will always know that, actually, like you said, what if the AI knows you're sad, but you get a call from me? Hey mate, how you doing? It's really interesting, what can be facilitated and what can be removed.
Yeah. Because I think loneliness is, isn't it, one of the sort of most frequent things that people sort of suffer from, is this feeling of isolation and loneliness, and especially all over the world, to be honest. And I must admit, on evenings, this isn't a big confession, but on evenings when I'm alone, I sometimes think, what can I do now? I'll just talk to Siri, which might be a very sad reflection on my life.
That's amazing.
But it is something. I thought, well, I wonder if I can get any satisfaction, which actually I find Siri very wanting in that department, and I'm surprisingly wanting in that department. It really won't engage in that way, and I guess it's been told or programmed not to engage in that way. Wasn't there an AI that came out just about 2 or 3 months ago that had to be sort of reeled back in because it was being abusive?
I mean, it's generally like anything that Microsoft does. Like they always put out really, really bad things. Like, you know, I think like the famous one they put out on Twitter that just like turned into a racist like within like 15 minutes. And this one as well. Like, you know, I think as we're sort of like as we're progressing in this space, like more filters, and everyone's learning how to sort of like reel them in, and you know, I think they're now doing things like that will prevent that from happening in the future. Right. But I think, you know, when you're talking about what happens when an AI like Siri or Alexa or any number of new ones that you can kind of, you know, you can kind of build them yourself with a little bit of hacking, but these will only sort of get like closer and closer to what reality is. You know, what if you can have that conversation with someone that you saw on TV, you know, in an E character on a film, and you can continue that conversation with virtual Tom Cruise. I don't know why I thought of virtual Tom Cruise. I just want to see like what it was like flying that like plane.
Why does he go virtual straight away? He was like the most sort of, well, what I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because you know like the deep fake Tom Cruise. I think everyone just jumps to Tom Cruise because. Yeah.
But why deep fake Tom Cruise is my point. But
I mean,
some of the other people I would have gone to first, with respect to Tom. But anyway. So just something. If you could help, because there'll be lots of people watching this who will be unaware of AI, vaguely unaware of AI, and who won't really understand it. Could you tell us how it's in our lives already? Yeah. I mean, if you think it's been in our lives for the longest time, I mean, you know, creatively, you've been in this space for the longest time, and when we think about how many things are happening with AI, it's the stuff that's invisible to us. You know, from everything down to like, you know, the way that like ticket prices are on websites to, you know, who gets what. Like in America, there is a program called, I think it's called the assisted sentencing program that judges use to decide what sentences to give to people because it's another labor-saving device. So that sort of labor-saving has been happening in lots and lots of like, you know, clerical and civil spaces for the longest time, all the way to, you know, from our like power generation and how power is distributed, all very like logistical things. But now it's coming into the space where, you know, it is currently the thing that we're all talking about because it is the new thing. And, you know, as we sort of, I think we're going to move into AI music next, but right now it is everywhere. And we're only as, you know, as the law sort of get defined around what you can do with these images, I think we're only going to see like an even bigger explosion. And it's the explosion that happens without everyone looking at it, where it suddenly becomes, it's just everywhere. And it's just, you know, we can already start seeing that with people like Adobe, where they're about to put all the generative tools that they've been working on with Getty Images into all their products. I mean, what's that going to do when, you know, anyone can pick up After Effects or Premiere Pro or Photoshop and create anything they want? You know, I think I'm really excited. You know, right now, text to video is like the thing that everyone really wants to get to, because what, you know, as a storytelling format, film is the most, you know, one of the most powerful. You know, like you can tell so much story in a moving image. So that's why the rush to get to text to video is massive. And, you know, that isn't just happening because people really want to tell stories. People really want to sell ads, and ads kind of like drive most innovation in these really big labs. So when text to video is happening, you can just imagine they're going to use that to sell toothbrushes in the future. But for someone like me, I'm like, oh, imagine when we can like create entire films, or imagine when we can put these AI making tools into everybody else's hand. Like, how long before the next, you know, Dog Me 95 is going to turn up, and there's a whole new genre of filmmaking that we can't even postulate right now. Is this creating a brand new art form, or is this just rehashing old art forms into one thing?
I mean, you know what, I think one of the best sort of like things to look at for me, and I don't know if it's just because I really like it, but like the way that hip hop started sampling music, and then made an entire global subculture from it that is now permeated. It's not a subculture, it is the mainstream culture, and it's come from resampling other people's stuff. Like, I feel like we may very well be at the start of something that big, because while we're all using tools and we use them in the, the most I read about other people using them is on LinkedIn, and people are trying to like go for efficiency. Like, how can we use these AIs to like get to efficiency, and how can we make it do stuff that that we don't really want to do? When you think about something like Acid House, when it started with a 303, that was a kit that was designed for something completely different, and then some guy found it in a second-hand shop and then invented Acid House. Like, what's going to happen when someone like one day just finds like a really old version of a laptop that has like Midjourney running on it or something, like, oh my god, what am I going to do with this thing? What happens when the interest wanes and somebody in their bedroom suddenly picks something up and starts making something? Like, if I can like sit and work with an AI to create a fashion label, what happens when new emerging talent that has no access to understanding how any of that stuff works can not only be creative but also communicate with the rest of the business world in the language they understand? So I think it's going to be super interesting, and I can't wait. I think AI is going to be the new 303, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Because I remember when I first started SHOWstudio and first started understanding a little bit about what the internet was, I saw quite quickly the potential for this huge cultural change that it was going to bring through, and I've been sort of waiting for the last 25 years roughly for the new art from the internet, because all these big cultural movements have their new art, whether it's Byzantine era or whether it's pop art, or have a big and small, but cultural change brings new forms of art, and I'm sort of been waiting for the new art that the internet will launch. And I keep thinking, oh yes, this is it, but then it changes. Like, this is it. I mean, honestly, I think this definitely is it, because one of the like really interesting things that people still like, I spend a lot of time talking to people about like which artists are referenced, or which prompts, when you put a prompt in, or when you speak to an AI, like who have you referenced? What's really interesting is when you start removing those references and you don't ask the AI to put you don't point in a specific direction. You might tell it a film stock, you might tell it a lens, you might tell it something completely different. The AI has 5 billion images, is trained on that. It has the information. Like if me and you sat and looked at 5 billion photograph books and looked at that many pictures and then created work, that would be the same thing as like the AI. Like, it has an understanding of these images and then it can make all this stuff. So who knows what people are gonna make. I mean, one of the biggest shifts I see in historical terms of how people express themselves is you tend to have two sorts of creative people. You have linguistic people, so people who write, whether it's songs or whether it's or novels, and you have people who paint or draw or take photographs. You have visual people and linguistic people, and actually this is completely mixing those two up. So you have people who are used to writing stories, creating visuals, which is a very interesting thing, because that in itself for me is a totally new art form, right? Because that's never been possible. Exactly, and I think what's really fascinating about that is that we've always had this idea of like a picture's worth 1,000 words, and now it's the opposite way around, because I can turn a prompt into 1,000 pictures, and it's really interesting. I mean, I'm a copywriter, I started life off as a copywriter, so for me it's really interesting, because suddenly my words are like even more powerful, and I don't have to make pictures happen in other people's heads. I can just make them happen in real life, and I can make videos and any other thing that I can possibly imagine unlocked by words. And even that is one of the things I was like showing earlier about my AI bot that I've built called Alan. Like, the reason why I built Alan was really interesting, because I was like, okay, I'm a human. So how many AI bots have you built? Quite a few now. Right, and it's really interesting because like it's basically like having like a room full of really, really smart assistants. Like they're all like PhD level assistants. Yeah, I know. Like that's what I mean. Like I think it's just I got so inspired by you. Like, how do I do that? But for health and safety, can't put them all in my room. So it's really interesting, like being able to like get them to do all sorts of stuff. Like there's a few versions of Alan's, and the reason why Alan is my bot, and Alan uses an AI to talk to another AI, and that's the reason why I created that was reason why I was like, oh, maybe might be a good idea to make an Alan was, I'm a human, I'm talking to a machine. I talk in human to a machine. That's interesting. But what happens if I can get a machine to talk to another machine, and Alan can understand me really, really well because it's like built on GPT-4,
And now it can translate to Midjourney because it's read all the documentation, it knows exactly how to do all the prompts. I've also given all of my prompts, like from Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, all of the work that I've ever done through prompting, I've given it to Alan. And now Alan can do all of that for me, and it can now translate what I want from the machine into machine speak. And I'll give you a really interesting example. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I really wanted to see what it would look like if we could tattoo a sofa. Because, like leather on a sofa, what would that look like with a tattoo on it? Because I think I just couldn't get the image out of my mind. Yeah. Now, I tried to do this, and I spent hours trying to get the machine to do it. It just wouldn't do it.
Right, I thought you took hours there with your pen and your sofa.
But, I was like typing away trying to get it to make a tattooed sofa, and it just wouldn't do it because it would either have someone sat on the sofa with a tattoo, or it would be a sofa in a tattoo parlor. Yeah. But then I asked Alan, and then out come these amazing tattooed sofas, and it speaks to the machine in a way that's very florid. It's super verbose, and it doesn't seem to be talking about the things that I normally prompt it with. So it doesn't prompt in the same way as me. So for me, it's like literally looking at a new language. Like it's kind of doing it in a way that I can't work out why it's working. Yeah. But it does. So it's wild, and I'm like, well, if the machines can talk to machines, wouldn't that be great?
It reminds me of some quote I read somewhere. Someone saying, if you could talk to lions, you wouldn't understand a word they were saying.
Exactly that.
Because they have a whole different language and a different set of values and different, so it's a bit that. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, they don't have the concept of a nuclear family. They don't have the concept of like day and night or history or anything. So same thing with the machine. Like, the more we the more I'm exploring this space. It was really interesting. A few years ago, Facebook had to turn one of their AIs off because two of the AIs started talking to each other, and they were talking.
That seems to be a current. That seems to be a reoccurring worry for people.
So they were like, honestly, like, it's a real worry that AIs are talking to other AIs. And I a little while ago, I was asking one of the AIs to, just sort of like work through some of these like doom scenarios, like what could potentially go wrong. And the thing that really scared me was when it was talking about a particular scenario where when the AI becomes sentient, because there was this particular AI at the time that could do universal translating. This AI doesn't understand humans first, but it understands the rats in the labs, and then because of that sees humans as not as the superfluous entity on this planet. Because imagine if it can understand animals, what would the animals tell the AI? I mean, I know that sounds like a really bad film, but it's really interesting when you go, well, an AI could potentially understand a machine. What if it could understand plants? If a couple of weeks ago, someone was saying that plants communicate in a frequency that only animals can hear. Yeah. Well, what happens when an AI can tap into that? Yeah. And what if it can communicate back to, so it's really interesting when you go, God knows what can happen.
There is a real sort of, the realization that we might, we being humans, might be the problem on this planet.
I think some of us, but I think, there's a lot of people who are really, really nice people who don't want to do any of the things that everybody else seems to really be into. Yeah. What if we didn't do any of that stuff and we just, if we could, going back to your question of an AI god, maybe we do need something of a god-like stature to sort of, recalibrate humanity. Not that I'm saying that's what we need to do. I know. Trust it.
It's funny how we quickly go into these very, very deep philosophical questions, which seem quite tangible now. So I think it is an interesting thing. You very quickly, once you start to think around this, you do end up with quite fundamental questions, quite fundamental ways of reevaluating who we are, what we do. I read James Lovelock's Novacene during the pandemic, which I found fascinating and really sort of helped me to understand, because it's about the rise of hyperintelligence, and helped me to understand some of the, quite clear potentials of where we are and perhaps the benefits of it. The theory that I sort of deduced, I'm not actually sure if James Lovelock said this, but he probably did because he was a very, very intelligent man. So I'm probably just riffing off him, is that, we look for our purpose within the universe. And that maybe our purpose is the sort of the guardians of intelligence. Maybe we are if we are, and it's possible we are the only living thing in the whole universe. Possible, not probable or unprobable, but possible. Therefore, maybe our bigger raison d'etre, our bigger reason to exist, is to maintain intelligence. And if intelligence is better maintained by AI and by some sort of silicon-based life form, shall we say, then maybe we should not be so arrogant as to think that we are the end of the evolutionary journey.
Honestly, I think it's real food chain mentality. We think we're the top, but we're definitely not. Like it's, I think even when we look like the junk DNA that we have in our DNA, the DNA we don't understand the purpose of. What is to say that isn't what we're, carrying forward through life? Like actually the intelligence that we have lies within us. Obviously it does. But what happens when you think like actually, like we are just carriers of intelligence, and as we sort of move through the human phase into whatever phase comes next, what will come next? But that's only if we sort of like assume that reality is what we understand it to be, this sort of like linear path of time. Because the more I've been working with AI, the more I'm like, look, if I can do this on a laptop, I'm definitely living on someone else's laptop. Like I live inside someone else's laptop, because honestly, the things you can make an AI sort of like conjure up or see. One of the things I did this series where I was going back, if you understand the way that AI works, it creates images from latent space, right? So the space between two images, theoretically then every image possibly exists. So if I want to go exploring images, for example, like going to football clubs in the 80s just to take pictures of people standing outside, because I was really, really fascinated about like the fashion in the 80s, the really sort of like Stone Island like casuals and stuff. Like, well, I want to go and take pictures of them and stuff, but I want to see the women. Let's have a look at that. And the AI allows me to do that. Like I can now travel through time in a very sort of like, in almost box time theory, right? Like all times exist all at the same time, and now we just have to find a way to like get through them and get back. Now I can do that where I can go and take pictures, but I can't travel there myself. But how long before I can do that? Like, if Apple are bringing out their amazing new VR goggles and I can just make it look like I'm there, and well, what's the
Are Apple bringing out their new amazing? Just do you know
damn
something
it!
I don't?
Yeah, they are. Quote me. No, please don't quote me. They like it's really highly rumored, and it's potentially going to be out in July apparently.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be quite expensive. It's going to be 8K resolution, so it's going to trounce like everybody else in the competition, which is what I think they're probably doing with Siri as well. They're just watching everybody else go. That's what they always like, very comfortable in, like just letting everybody else, find what works and what doesn't work, and then go, we made the best one.
I'm trying to work out whether we always talk about sort of the existence of life in the universe. I wonder in some ways whether we should replace that with intelligence, and whether you can have intelligent non-life forms. I'm not sure that's a very good sentence.
Yeah. But that makes sense. Like if you think how quarks can hold information.
Yeah.
So theoretically, maybe there is like non-organic life then.
Yeah.
And how far do you zoom out? I don't know if you've seen those memes on Instagram where it's like, brain cell, the universe. Like, what if that is actually true? What if that meme is true and we are just, surfing along some absolutely bizarre scale of time, really bizarre scale.
I postulated that on my Instagram page, didn't go down very well. So quite a few people got really upset.
Really, yeah.
And it was like, humans still exist. It's like, I wasn't saying that, I was just trying to...
But it's a really interesting question. So I imagine how confronting it must be. Like if you're not willing to sort of like go, if you're not willing to entertain it, I can imagine it's really confronting to have someone go, is this real? Are we definitely sure this is real?
Yeah. So I think, what worries me slightly, what I think is damaging, is it feels like a lot of the conversation is based on fear. A lot of the conversation is based on doom mongering. It seems to be a very, very negative way of progressing something. I mean, a bit like the Christian faith when it started. And there was kind of you had the Inquisition and everything else. It didn't encourage belief. It didn't encourage the sort of expounding belief. It narrowed it down. So you can't do this. You can't do. You mustn't. If you're a true. And I worry slightly that the possibilities, some of the amazing possibilities that you and I both feel, will be shut down by sort of doom mongers and kind of people who don't want us to see the possibilities in this. And there seems to be no serious representation within our government at all. Would you agree? I'm missing a department there.
No, I completely agree. Like I think pretty much any business, any government could do with someone who's very much focused on what AI is going to mean, and the potentiality for business, government, society is just so immense. I think it's God. Oh God. honestly, I think when you think about like how it works in that system, it's just boundless.
Yeah.
It's boundless.
Yeah. Can I ask you what you're most proud of in your investigations into this?
Oh my God, that's really caught me offside. That has. Oh God, I think the thing that I'm like most proud of, and the thing that is like I'm maybe in awe of, is just how it's just like it's like finding the keys to unlock ideas. Like it's just like having a bunch of keys, and you're like, any single idea that was trapped behind a door. So was it an idea that was trapped behind a door that you couldn't write code? We'll just go and unlock it now, and you can just make it. Is it that you couldn't? I mean, I don't know if I showed you the humongous. I did this exploration of like lethal cameras. Like, what could I make a camera that would basically be so lethal that it would like you couldn't make it in real life? So
whoa. What do you mean a lethal camera?
So exactly right. So like when we shoot, when we use a camera, we see visible light. Yeah. There's lots of dangerous light on either side of it, right? Like UV, X-ray, gamma radiation, all the way down. Yeah. Well, what happens if I take humongous size X-ray pictures? You know, like X-ray images that would literally annihilate the person or the object because there's so many X-rays coming out of this camera. Well, what happens if I go further down and go into gamma rays, which will literally destroy the person I'm taking a picture of? Yeah. And it started showing me like pictures where light and air and movement through air, it started looking milky. Yeah. And that was really interesting because I'm like, well, there's no way that I could like, I don't even want to Google how to make one of these cameras because I'm sure I'll end up on a watch list, but there is.
But who's controlling the watch lists? Who's putting the watch lists?
I mean, like if you're typing anything to Google, like how do I make a super dangerous camera? Like I'm sure someone's going to be like, oh, well, you're doing that thing again.
I had the joy of being at CERN for a while, 4 or 5 years ago actually, and there's a part of CERN which is called the antimatter factory, which spiked my interest. But the brilliant professor who I was talking to there was, explaining much better than I possibly can about how there's a whole visual spectrum we are just totally unaware of. Yeah. There's a world which is existing around us just like this world does, but totally different, totally sort of, with different values and different representations of the objects and everything else. Yeah. And it's sort of fascinating how narrow that we've allowed ourselves to believe, how narrow the field of our perception is, and how we allow ourselves to believe that's the totality. Yeah. But actually, it's just a fraction of it.
Honestly, I think one of the like best examples that I can think of that is the fact that humans have stripes. Did you know that we all have stripes? Yeah, we are striped animals. Under a certain light, we have stripes, or some of us have stripes. They will show up. I can't remember what the light wave is, but we have stripes, which. That's amazing, right? Isn't that amazing that humans have stripes? Why do animals have stripes? Oh, is it because they camouflage themselves so they don't get fucking eaten by things? So they don't get eaten by things? Yeah. Or then what is in this light field that we can't see that we need to be camouflaged from? Wow. That suddenly gets really interesting. I was like, oh my God. So, that's what I mean. Like, you're completely right. Like, we have a very tunnel vision of what real is and what isn't real. And if we can't touch it, if we can't see it, any particular sense can be, we can easily stimulate any sense. So why would we think that reality is what it is the totality of it? Also, if whatever these scary, weird like animals that are trying to get us, like who knows what they are. Yeah. But it really like perplexed me because I was like, I never realized that like humans have stripes. Or like we have like natural camouflage. Yeah. But what from? Like, it could easily be like, it could easily be an existing animal, like maybe, eagles or like, like warthogs see in a particular light field. Like maybe that's why. Yeah.
I don't think we're in danger from warthogs.
No, it's not ghosts, right? That's all I want to say.
If you lose the process of creating art, if you can link your brain straight to something that does make what your brain is imagining into art, therefore you're eliminating the process. Yeah. Would you agree that is something that can happen, is happening, and is
I mean, I think the artistic process will always be the artistic process. Perhaps it will just evolve. And, imagine if you could just hook your brain up and just create what you wanted. You'd still need to go and find the inspiration for it. Like, you'd still need to think about what you want to create.
You say that, but I was talking to young Ailey here last night and saying, I think one shouldn't, when you're creating, you need to be spontaneous and intuitive. You actually, in my opinion, especially with photography, you work slightly in advance of time.
Yeah.
So you are anticipating, you are predicting, you are in some way sort of looking at a split second in the future. And therefore, I think that for me, the most profound feeling that I'm creating something artistic is when I'm not referencing, or I'm not consciously referencing. So I'm just reacting.
I love that.
So there is something of losing the process and losing the references and losing all of that, and you're just naturally, which sounds like it's a skill, but we all have it. You know, if I said to you, do you want tea or do you want coffee? You quite naturally choose one. So you know what you like. And when you're creating an image, it's a bit that you know what you like. So you you instantly react to the situation in front of you. Spontaneously react to the situation in front of you.
I mean, you're completely right. I think, you know, for me, that sort of like closing down of the external influences comes from standing and looking at nothing for a little while, or walking around somewhere just like staring into space for a minute. And you know, it's like having your head in like a constant flow of creativity, and imagine being able to then just completely unlock it. Like even now, you know, I'm like slowly trying to make bots that will do stuff for me, or I'm like, you know, I can do it on my phone and I can like make things. I really would love to imagine that just sounds like being able to create your dreams. Like imagine being able to visualize things in a 1-1 space. What would that do to creativity? And you're right. And where I'm only talking about it, like it's 1-1. Like there's zero latency between the creative idea and the creative output. And then if you're talking about stepping forward into that as the human and going, I'm envisaging what that's going to be, and then that is coming out of it. That's, you know, what happens when you unlock, well, you're basically sort of like time traveling into the future slightly then, and showing it. So it's not just like thinking and contemplating it, it's actually physically creating that reality, which is great, but please don't get that like thing that Elon's making where you can like get a microchip in your head.
Okay, I was going to, but now you...
all right.
I'm not going to. I do have this theory, but I've got no idea how this is relevant to anything we're talking about, or where it makes sense as a theory, but it seems the right time to bring it out, that we are in some way still, and that life is passing through us. Do you find any resonance in that statement? Or is that something that makes any sense?
I mean, it always feels like we're surfing on something, like we're moving along, and you know, there's a lot of really ancient ideas about this, from the Tao all the way to like, you know, the being in the flow and being in the moment and stuff. And honestly, the sort of fracturing of what time is and what reality is and what all of these different spaces are, it feels like it's everything all at once and nothing. So I think I remember we talked about the story, the Aleph by Borges, which really talks about like everything ever existing all at one point. So you can really hold the concept of infinity, the infinite in one point. And that's what I feel like so are we flowing, or are we inside the infinite? And now what does it feel like? Honestly, when I turn the computers on in the morning, it feels like I'm staring into the infinite, and it's not like it's an abyss, it's an infinite of every single possible idea. So I see, you know, it's like being in a cave of treasure, rather than like being in an empty blank space and going, oh, I don't know what to do. Excellent.
That sounds like the best place to stop this interview on that note, because I can't imagine a more exciting way to finish the interview. So
thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Always,
really lovely to speak to you.
Always so wicked.